This is my face. There was supposed to be intro music, but I made a mistake. So that's cool. Run it back. Hey, what's going on, guys? Yeah, what a mess. It's just been one after the other. I was supposed to have news and views this morning. Ended up being solo because we got power outages over here. I thought I had a panel for our Dune spoiler discussion. Obviously, I created this overlay a little last minute. But my hopes, and I guess just my hopes and prayers are that enough people are interested in talking about Dune, because man, is it something worth talking about, that maybe we can get the chat going, we get some Streamlabs going, we can all get the juices flowing of conversation. Share the link, bring your friends on, just like, hey, come in the chat, let's talk about Dune. Full spoilers. I've been having to dance around things for what feels like a week. I guess it's only been a few days, but I want to talk about how incredible I think this movie is, and a lot of that means like starting from like the imagery in the very beginning, the way the music complements certain scenes. We're gonna have to talk about deaths, betrayals, set pieces, and everything like that. So really, I am just gonna try to fumble my way through talking about the movie, take some comments from you guys, and we'll see what happens. I have sent the invite out to a few people. Originally, there was going to be some people that were going to be here when we started. I think they forgot. Whatever happened. So, with that, I open the floor to you guys. First of all, let's just talk about Dune from the surface level. Dune is directed by Academy Award nominated. He's won. I think maybe for Arrival. But Denis Villeneuve, starring Oscar Isaac, Timothy Chalamet, Jason Momoa, Stellan Skarsgård as the incredible Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, and Rebecca Ferguson, David Smalchian. It just goes on and on and on. And I've been saying for a while now that I think that, pardon me while I hydrate, it's hard when you're the only one talking all the time. I believe this is the greatest cast I've seen in like the last 15 years in film. And they did not disappoint. Granted, if we're talking about things that we would have liked to see more of, or I guess some more problems, I only really have one. I just wanted more. I wanted another 30 minutes, an hour, and everyone's like, well, you get that in part two. That's what I'm talking about, not just the continuation of the story, more of what was in this chunk of the story. Because this might surprise you, but even cutting the book in half and giving us 2.5 hours of film, they still cut out quite a bit. But I think that's what you have to do with this movie, there's a lot of lore that's left on the table because you want to avoid what David Lynch kind of did in the 84 version, which is just spoon feed you exposition and explanations, just scene after scene after scene. But I think it would have behooved them to find a way to maybe further explain things like the Mentats. And for those of you that do not read the Dune books, and I can't act all hoity-toity, I've read 2 Dune books, so I'm not that far ahead of you, but I'm a recent fan. I've really enjoyed it. It is such an immersive world, a la like Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, and I think there's a lot of reasons why people refer to Dune as the sci-fi Lord of the Rings. I think that's exactly it. And so for those of you that didn't know that this was going to be a part 1 and are disappointed by it, I'm curious how you felt when you watched Fellowship of the Ring, or was Two Towers and Return of the King already out by the time you did that? I think that's part of it. Some stories are just they sprawl over, because film is a limited medium in some ways. You can't, when you're adapting, you can't do a story like that in 2.5 hours and have it be completely, what's the word I'm looking for, satisfying. So I think Denny did an incredible work with this film. It's absolute masterclass filmmaking, and it was complemented by Hans Zimmer's incredible score. It was something that you can feel in your bones. I felt shaken to my core listening to that. I went on 2 walks this morning already. I guess it's afternoon now, and I'm always listening to the Hans Zimmer score. Now, I do have one guest that has shown up in the lobby here. I'm just looking for a thumbs up to see if she is ready to go and talk some stuff. All right, we got thumbs up. Awesome. So I don't have to get hoarse just talking to myself. Somebody that hasn't been on the channel in a while. So I'm excited to welcome on my good friend and co-host for today, Alex. How you doing, Alex?
Hi. Yes, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I can't stop talking about Dune. It's a problem. I might need to seek help.
I am in a very similar situation because I also cannot stop watching it. Yeah, it's definitely something I feel like I constantly bring up in multiple chats. I've brought it with my family. I just talked about it with Lucas. I was like, "Hey, Lucas, I'm gonna be chatting Dune in here," but and he's like, "Really?" Oh. But just saw it the other day, so I'm excited to chat with you here. And I assume, based on you being like, "Oh, it's so haunting and everything," you're talking about the Zimmer score, right?
Yes, 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 yes.
Because I hated the score.
Did you?
There's points I literally laughed out loud listening to it.
Oh wow.
I was like, because I know going into it, I understand why they went in that direction. I kept thinking about it. Reminded me so much of the really horribly sound edited music version of Justice League, Zack Snyder, with the Wonder Woman's,
Ah, okay.
where it would be like it would be like a hardcore electric mix during a like fight scene. You're like, okay, good score so far. I'm into this. And then out of nowhere, it would be like Wonder Woman's theme where and then and you're like, wait, what?
You just have the subtitles on. It's like lamentation music.
Yeah, it did, and it was just like, oh fuck.
I will. This turned out right here turned out to be a much bigger problem than I anticipated because for me, obviously it's part one, but like it's everything Denny said outside of like the trailers. Like, yeah, the marketing has not been.
Yeah,
It has not said Dune Part One. It does the second the movie starts. But everything outside of the marketing, like if you've read a single article about Dune, everything Denny said, he's like, this is part one. And I don't know, like I'm sure when Fellowship of the Ring came out, they didn't go, oh, it's Lord of the Rings Part One, even though it's kind of what it is because it's part one of the trilogy.
yeah,
And I'm hearing a lot of complaints about it, and a lot of people saying, well, they should have cut here instead or cut here. And I was like, from having read the book, that was the place to cut. Like that is the transitional shift of the Paul Atreides character as he goes from being Paul Atreides to being intertwined with the Fremen and then becoming
yeah.
Muad'Dib, which is the Messiah figure. But we'll get into that. Like it says, spoilers up there, so that means spoiling this movie, spoiling the next movie. We're just going.
Yeah. My husband, he has read the book, and it has been a very long time since he read the book. But thing is, I am very much a layman going into this movie. I have not read the book. I did not read any articles going into it. I knew it was going to be a part one just because it is. I figured. I remember being told forever ago that Dune is like has like 3-4 books, and I'm like, they're not going to cover all that in one movie. Like, no. And I figured it was going to be a franchise. However, I do think one of the big things what I really love about Lord of the Rings in particular, why it's so successful is I think each of the movies really work individually. There is a set start, middle, and end. And even if you are not, if they don't ever go up to Mordor and drop in the whole ring and everything, it's
Right,
a
you can enjoy
solid
Fellowship.
it's a solid finish, and you feel and I always felt like it was like you felt it felt like a complete story inspired of being a part one of a trilogy. um Dune, I did not get this
I think
at
part of
all.
that comes from like Fellowship, yeah, it's part one of the story, but it's also a whole book, you know. And this is cutting a book in half, like a Deathly Hallows part one, part two.
Yeah, I
And
wish
I
it,
think
it had like a colon and be like book one or like part one or something like that.
right,
Just
because it's not
for
it's half of
like I
one
said,
book.
for the layman's or like myself that don't know better. And not, let's face it, not everyone's going to go back and read a bunch of articles and read interviews regarding Denny and the cast. Like that's not everyone's going to do that realistically.
Sure, and I think that's fair. I don't know what the thought process was, but it seems to have been to the detriment. There's a lot of people that have a problem with it being part one or how it exists as a part one.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not. It doesn't. There is no satisfactory ending with the movie at the. Because I honestly think that. I think it's. I do not want to put out there that I hate this movie because I don't. I actually really, really enjoy this movie, but I didn't feel satisfied by the ending just because I was like, "That's it." That was the most anticlimactic thing ever. We're having this random one-on-one fight with a guy I still don't really like with Chari or whatever her name is, where she literally has like 2 minutes of screen time. Meanwhile, she's everywhere in the marketing. I was like, what?
Yeah, I feel
she literally has serves. She didn't need it. It was very frustrating for her.
I feel a little. I guess I feel a lot bad for anyone that hasn't like absorbed the story because I think everything's for me is so perfect because I know what's coming and where this takes place in the book. But I totally understand why it can be completely frustrating when you're like, hey, Zendaya's in this movie. She has 2 lines. I'm like, well, yes, like that's
I don't care. We'll say I don't care that she's in the movie for 2 minutes. What I do care about is that she's everywhere in the marketing. She is like she's in the top 3 build in the movie. Cool. Love that for her. Also, go girl. Love you. But
the bone structure between the two of them is just
they should not have marketed that way. They almost marketed it almost as a sci-fi epic romance. And if that's the direction they end up going with, okay, but that was not this movie. I expected more of tension. I expected more. It was just like a weird thing.
People often have said for decades now that Dune is an unadaptable, unfilmable movie. And whereas I think Denny has proven them wrong, it stands to reason that it is then, therefore, a difficult movie to market. Because I can't tell you, I've showed the Dune trailers to several of my friends, and they're like, I don't know what's happening. And I was like, I can't help you. And the trailers can't help you. Like I wouldn't know how to cut a Dune trailer because I would just cut the things that I think are awesome because I know Dune, and people are like, I don't know what that is. Like I have no context for what's going on. So like unlike Star Wars where you see, lightsaber fights and like use of the Force and talk of like that, like it grabs people instantly. Dune is a really dense political mythical like epic that is so hard to like condense even like I really hope Peter Jackson I need another 30 minutes at least just for this part of the story.
Well, even more what I think is even more difficult to make it more marketable towards the average person is that what makes Star Wars so great, what makes Lord of the Rings so great, etc., is because it is a human story told through this large epic. Everyone knows how these characters can relate, how these characters can feel, the fear, the anxiety, the anger. We don't really get that in this movie. We're just more confused because we don't understand what any of it means. Like I was like, okay, what does the one mean? She's training him, but she's not supposed to, and she's his mom, but she's not married to the dad. She's technically the concubine,
right? Because
told us, but she's also the daughter of the mother reverend, but at the same time she's not supposed to
actually.
And then and so I was really confused like going into it.
It's hard. I can't unlearn what I know. So like my brain's automatically like firing 100 miles per hour and just being like, okay, got it.
Exactly.
And I think I watched it with my wife, obviously, who really loved it, and she had some questions, and I was happy to answer the questions and fill in it. But I'm coming to realize that I think one of the reasons people said that's unfilmable is like, how do you put on screen so much exposition?
Yes.
Because there's pages and pages and pages of things explained. And David Lynch's attempt at that is like, let's just have 5 minutes of voiceover. I'm like, that's not what you do. That is a mistake.
Well, he not only did he make a mistake, he was very vocal about how much he regrets that movie. He doesn't want to be associated with that movie in any way. He also said that he had almost all of his creative liberties taken away from him while filming. And he's like, that's not the movie I intended to make. It's not my movie at all. I don't even want to. I'm like on my IMDb page.
So that's fair. Well, fine. I'll stop blaming David Lynch. I'll just say that movie is a mistake. And there's so many things wrong about it. And like, take the datedness out of it. It starts on the right foot narratively, and then it takes like a hard right towards the end and skips over probably the crux or the core of the story. Let's talk about, I guess, what works from the beginning. I kind of want to work my way through the movie here. How do you feel about Caladan? Because I thought Caladan, where the Atreides family is from, I thought it was beautiful. I think it provides a really great contrast for once you get to Arrakis. Like, you remember seeing all this beautiful black stone and the water and the growth, and you get to just barren Arrakis. And a lot of the storytelling, I think, is done visually and through the music. One of those might work for you.
It's definitely personal preference. I do want to make sure I'm thinking of the right thing. Are you talking about his home planet?
Yes, where the movie kicks off. I've heard it pronounced both ways, but I think it's Duke Leto.
Okay, well, Duke Leto, the first, because I know he ends up having a grandbaby. Spoilers. But
in one incarnation of the Sci-Fi Channel, played by James McAvoy.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Nice little throwback there. But yeah, so I had to remember that's the planet. I thought it was very beautiful. It was a shame we saw so little of it because I was a little confused. I was like, is everything underground? And because because of the surface of the planet is uninhabitable? No? Okay. So are there large buildings where it's like a cityscape? No, it's not. It's more like a village? No, it's not that. So I was just like, we're getting these beautiful, large, grand, ancient rooms, and there's these ships and stuff everywhere. But I was like, where? Like, my geography. Sorry, Rain. The geography regarding this movie is a little confusing. With a lot of movies, you have a really great sense of geography where point A it is and point B is. In this movie, there isn't. I thought it was beautiful. I didn't know what any of it was. I was like, there's points where I was like asking Lucas, and I was like, is that supposed to be a graveyard? And he's like, I guess.
The bit of hidden, I call it like kind of hidden exposition that we got, and it was when Paul has his book and it like explains the Fremen and the creature, and it's explained to him Arrakis. I would have liked a scene that justifies him looking into the Imperium, because the Imperium is like all these royal families. I think it's called the Lantat or something like that.
That would have been news to me because I didn't literally thought it was like a privately owned militia up until Lucas told me it was like an aristocratic family, similar to like old school aristocracy in Europe. And I was like, no clue, no fucking clue. I literally thought he was like a prince or a king or something. Because they literally, like, I was like, is that do they run the government? Is he like royalty? And then I later heard he like about an emperor, and I'm like, okay, so he's definitely not a king.
You have the emperor, and then there's like all these royal families with their own planets and stuff stretched out across the galaxy.
But that's what, did I miss a monologue?
There's a few references to the Imperium. I think a lot of this, they just are really driving that the story is Paul's story and everything's from Paul's perspective, and so they're not giving a lot of outside information that doesn't directly pertain to Paul right now. The Imperium, in hoping that we get a part 2. I would assume, even though that like you didn't grab everything, you're kind of curious about part 2, see if more is explained, more is explored.
Well, this movie is almost exclusively exposition, right?
A lot of, yeah.
like a good.
It's a lot of introduction, and a
Yeah, a
part
lot
of
of
that
character
is
introductions.
it's your introduction to the desert and the Fremen, and that's like kind of the
Yes.
biggest, and the Baron.
The
So
group,
like your villain,
you're the villain, you know the hero, you know who the love interest is going to be, you know the trainers, all like this stuff, like what the end game is. It's pure, almost exclusively exposition. But aside from Rebecca Ferguson's character, that I don't know the name of,
Lady Jessica.
Lady Jessica, yes. I was just very confused. I understand, because like again, when it comes to like the geography and everything, I understood this for a movie that's almost exclusively exposition. I still had so many questions. There are so many points where I literally paused and asked Lucas to explain X, Y, and Z, because there was something in the background I didn't know what it was. That's totally fine. But if it ends up being something necessary to know.
Alex, did you see this in theaters?
No.
Okay, you watched it on HBO.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have subtitles on?
Yes.
Okay. I watch everything with subtitles, but I will say my second viewing was with subtitles. My first was in IMAX.
I watch a lot of foreign films, so it's so
I watched Ted Lasso with subtitles. I have no explanation. Everything's in subtitles.
Well, I mean, you're a great competitor, so you need those subtitles.
That's true. Well, I was talking about watching Desolation of Smog the other day, and I was like, once you put subtitles on, it takes so much longer to watch the film while you're taking notes.
Well, yeah. Well, there's like a handful of things where I'm like, oh, that's what he says, and I like I remember hearing. I competed in one of Video Chronics little matches on the movie Fifth Element, and I literally, up until maybe a year and a half ago, I literally thought Bruce Willis's character, his name was Gorbin with a G. His name is Corbin with a C. I had no fucking clue. It's like Corbin. Like, especially on a TV, they sound exactly the same. But like when you read it and you're like, oh fuck.
I will say upon my second watch of the movie with the subtitles on, where it really helps is when he starts having like spice induced visions and there's all the whispers and things. I was like, all this whispering and stuff is important shit, and it's like practically inaudible like in the theater. They talk about the Kisak Hadarak. I cannot pronounce it because it's not even close to an English word, but it's basically the Fremen word for the Messiah, or actually that's not the Fremen word. That is the Bene Gesserit, which are the sister witches. That is their word for like what Paul is destined to become. And you get this trifecta prophecy in Paul. He's he's fulfilling a Fremen prophecy, a Bene Gesserit prophecy, and then he's also trying to be a leader in his father's shadow. And everyone's like, oh, so he's just, it's just a white savior Messiah complex thing. And I'm like, stay tuned, everybody, because that is not the story of Dune.
But it is, however, a story about World War II, the white colonists' involvement in the Middle East, because the Atreides is actually not Atreides, but Arrakis are actually supposed to be heavily inspired aesthetically and culturally inspired by the Bedouin cultures of the Middle East. Yes. So it's a heavy commentary on not only race relations, obviously, but how pretty much European powers came in, fucked everything up, and took it over, and divided and conquered.
Well, so, I always have to pull back a little bit.
It is an argue, and they're having, and at the end of the day, they're also having a white guy come in and be their, in theory, savior. But it is a white savior story on a most basic level.
Well, I to a point. That's why I said, when everyone talks about Paul being the hero of the story, I go, from what you've seen to this point, he is not. Things will happen where this is much more of a cautionary tale than it is a let's put this person on a pedestal and this is the savior of these people, this tribe. It is polar opposite. I won't get into specifics and things, but you start to see that towards
So,
the end of Dune.
so an
Like,
Arachnid's character comes forward and ends up becoming the savior of the people.
what's that?
So an Arachnid individual comes in into being the savior of its people.
Oh, I'm just saying that Frank Herbert said he wrote Dune as a cautionary tale against charismatic leaders, and he made comparisons to people like Hitler.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's something. There's a lot of depth. There's a lot of layers to Dune, and I think what a lot of people see on the surface, there is more, and it's not as simplistically explained. But I'm really interested to see how they move forward with.
I am also really. I love the conscious effort on Denny's part to include more vocal female characters. Like I know Dr.
Leah Kynes.
Yeah, I know she wasn't. Her character wasn't supposed to be a female, but
No,
they made
but it worked. But didn't he improve the character?
It didn't change anything. It didn't change a damn thing, which I appreciate.
Because we're talking open spoilers, Dr. Leah Kynes' death is so much better in this movie than the original movie or the book. So Denny improved that. Lady Jessica, I think, was always great, but I think she's improved and on her path to being an even greater character. And I think one of the characters that could benefit the most from some better writing is actually going to be Chani, Zendaya's character. And I think hopefully we'll see that in part 2, because I think she's a little thin in the books.
Yep.
So
what I'm really hopeful to see is just more people of color that are going to be cast as characters that don't end up dying.
That's fair.
Duncan dies, Karen dies, Dr. Yahweh, sorry,
you were so close. I think it's Dr. Yue.
He dies. I was like, he's actually one of my favorite Chinese actors. He was actually one of my favorites in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. He dies. It's just weird seeing a heavy majority of actors, of characters that are played by people of color that end up dying in the movie for the sake of Paul, understandably, considering the story and everything. But I was just like, yeah, it's
a little bit of a double-edged sword, because you could leave them like traditionally white as they were, and then you just have a less diverse cast and they still die. So
did Jessica have to be a white woman? Did Leto? Leto or Charlotte Rankin's character?
Does Oscar? I mean, I don't know if it's does Oscar count as a
who?
Caucasian? Well, you said Leto, and I was like, does Oscar count as a Caucasian male?
Him, I don't know his ethnicity.
I know he's got Greek in him, or like, because it was one of the reasons he was tapped for Moon Knight. But I don't know.
I remember he was tapped for Moon Knight, but I don't know his specific ethnicity personally. But he also dies if he is.
I guess, fair point. So maybe that just works against it, which is something.
Regardless, he dies. A lot of people die that are people of color. It was a little distracting in this movie. Now they're all important characters, and I love seeing people of color in important characters like in Thrive, like Javier Bardem's character and him.
I know we didn't get a lot of them yet, but Stilgar is one of my favorite characters in the books, and Javier Bardem could not have been more perfectly casted as him. The way he strutted into the Duke's like little dais, and they're like, "Stop! Wait! Hold up!" He just walked right up to it. He's like, and spits on the table.
Then they don't know.
Yeah, it's like, thank you for the gift of your body's moisture. They did try. They leaned in a lot better, I think, into the Fremen culture in this film than the Lynch film, because that one, the Fremen like don't exist until the third act of the movie. And then they are literally just there to provide Paul with an army. And it's pretty...
So they're made to be expendable?
Well, yeah, I mean, in that version, they just kind of...
Right.
He shows up, and then... he doesn't even have the fight with Jamis. They're just like, you are...
Jamis, that guy too!
Yeah.
Another character. That's kind of important. Thank you. Man. Cell 5.
Well, you do have someone agreeing with you here. Says great point. Villeneuve tends to do that. Most of his movies kill off the
That
POC to prop up the white guy.
Thank you. I do want to mention that happens in a lot, not just Denny Villeneuve's character, but a heavy majority of movies in general. So
That
it's
is
very unfortunate.
that's definitely
Um,
problematic.
but these are, I'm very grateful that important characters, notable characters that people love, were played by people of color, and that there are so many female characters. Denis Villeneuve, he's is very vocally feminist, and he was like, I want to bring that involved in the writing. I wanted to bring forward in the music, and they hired a women's choir specifically to focus on the feeling of creating something ancient and yet modern, um, and otherworldly, to create the sound. And I love that. It's just like there's a lot of dead people.
Yeah, and I want to give some hope for the Momoa fans out there
Oh,
that as the
yeah.
books continue, we might not be
Also,
done with Duncan Idaho if Denis Villeneuve is given the chance to continue the story.
also, in my opinion, best casting.
Jason Momoa.
To me, it's my favorite casting, personally. And I said that someone that in all, well, he's up there with Rebecca Ferguson that played Lady Jessica. Personally, everyone else is pretty fantastic. I can, like Javier Bardem's character and everything. I can picture some other people. I can easily picture like Benicio del Toro in that role, and I think he could also kill it. Chiwetel Ejiofor, I can also see him absolutely annihilate that role. But with Jason Momoa in particular, I think he was pretty perfect, in terms of casting. Not only because he's already a little bit broy.
Well, Galaxy, I
Um,
gotta. You are on the spoiler talk, and you are talking to somebody that has read a couple books. So you can tell me in the chat. Do you want to know if he's still alive or not?
dun, dun, dun.
You didn't. We didn't see anything, and that is Gurney Halleck. And Gurney Halleck originally played by Patrick Stewart in the original film. Much improved casting. I love me some Patrick Stewart, but if you're talking about the gruff, like Master of Arms training Paul Atreides, I think that was a good choice. If you want to say, yeah, Gurney did not have to be a white guy, but if you're doing a white guy, Josh Brolin's a good
I mean,
pick.
he's a great pick. I think he was pretty darn perfect. It's also like really funny because Chalamet, he Duncan's character in particular was seemed almost written differently from everyone else's. And I
I think
say
that was
that
something
because
specifically improved by Denny.
exactly.
Jason's Duncan is a better Duncan than the books and a better
Yes.
Duncan than the original film.
Mhm.
Um, it's interesting to see what he chose to embellish upon or like add to. I think Leah Kynes is a better character. Um,
Mhm.
I think Johnny will be a better character. So as great as the Dune book is, it came out in the 60s. It's not perfect. There's a lot of dated perspectives and stuff in there. So I'm hoping that Denny continues to build upon what's already there and make it his own.
Well, Duncan's character in particular is he's meant to be almost like an antithesis of Duke Leto and James Brolin's character, Josh Brolin's character in particular, because he has a real connection with Paul. He's the person that Paul goes to, and he's like, I've been having these fucking dreams, dude. I don't know what the fuck they are, and he's like, you high? And you sure? I mean, I got some spice in my uniform, but yeah, it's like, yo, chill out. He's the one he goes to. He doesn't go to his mom, his dad. He doesn't go to Brolin, and they have this kind of relationship where he really calms him down, but he also believes him as well. And he's the one that's been training and working with them since he was a young kid. I believe in this movie he's meant to be like 15, 16, 17 or something like that.
Yeah, in the
Um,
books he was 16, and I don't know if they ever clearly state in this movie, which I think Timothy gets away with being an ambiguous age.
I don't think so. He looks like he's 12 to me, so that's a little
Well,
frustrating. But like that's actually to me that's actually kind of an issue because if they do make a sequel, I wouldn't want him to be in it because he looks like a baby. Because even if they do it in like 5 years where he looks older, Yeah, but he's still gonna look like he's 20 years old.
Well, the rest of the Dune story
Never-
all takes place within a couple years.
Okay, all right.
For the first book.
I thought he's at that. I thought by like it's over a span of decades, where by the second part we would be meeting him in his 35.
That's the second book, but since the
Okay.
first two parts are all one book, the first book is like he's in the desert for a couple of years, so it doesn't span the time. But once you get to Dune Messiah, yes, it is like a 10-12 year jump. And if you do that closely to this one, it doesn't make sense to really still use him. I agree. But I think this story would wrap up still using him.
Absolutely. With Duncan's character, his character feels written very, very different compared to everywhere else, because James Brolin, he literally tells them like every moment is a life or death situation. You can die at any second. You must always be prepared. He's like on the verge of quoting Shakespeare while walking off the fucking ship. And same with his parents, talking about you must always be prepared and everything. Meanwhile, Duncan's like, yo, hey, my man, my bro,
my boy. Yeah, and I think
I mean, he literally says it like 4 or 5 times in the movie, and I'm like,
we love Bromoa.
But if it just shows, I think, their relationship and how hurt Paul was, his reaction compared to some of the other characters and their sacrifice.
I think let me talk about sacrifice and things because of this spoiler talk. I have so many pros. I have very few cons, but one of them would be specifically the tragedy of the death of Duke Leto. I'm a huge Oscar Isaac fan. Obviously, I knew it was coming, but I wish we could have had that scene longer. And I think that's my one thing is I was like, I just need like 5 more minutes to breathe everywhere. It's weird that it's 2.5 hours, and some people say it's slow and boring. I was like, I felt like I kept wanting to wait. I'm like, slow down. Like let's be here. Let's experience this room, this city, this character. It could have been an easy 3-hour movie, I think, but I've said this before. Endgame earned its 3 hours. It created fans for a decade, and I think it's a hard sell to be like right out of the gate. We haven't had a Dune movie in like 37 years. Here's a 3-hour film. It'd be like, whoa. I mean, Lord of the Rings knew. That's why we had the extended editions come out on DVD. So I'm hoping that there's more we can see, and maybe that helps.
Absolutely agree.
People.
I will say, honestly, I was really surprised when I saw the time. I was like, yeesh, that's a 3 hours. I'm going to fucking hate that. Going into it, that's going to be my assumption, honestly. This movie is absolutely stunning. The costume design, the cinematography.
Oh, how many Oscar nominations are we talking here? It's one of my favorite things to discuss. And I know it's probably not going to be like best actor necessarily or best screenwriting.
I picture everything being almost exclusively tech-oriented cinematography.
Greg Fraser, I believe, who's going to be doing the Batman.
Yeah. There's a lot to, again, visually speaking, there's a lot to take away from this movie, and there's so much to love and appreciation. The investment in not only the absolute devotion to making this movie a vibe. This movie feels on the verge of being gothic without having spiky hair. Like it's so dark. There's like points where I was like, do I need to change like the lighting or something like that? Because I can't really see anything. Like the library scene was such an iconic scene, such a cool scene. And I understand why they went that direction visually speaking, but I was like, I can't see anything. He's wearing black, the black on his back. She looks like a chess piece, which is really cool, but she's also wearing black.
Are you talking about the Reverend Mother with the ganja bar, the box?
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, that's black. The carpet is like dark, muted colors. So all the books in the background were black, and I was just like, I can't see anything. This feels like watching that episode from Game of Thrones a few years ago.
Oh my gosh.
I was just like,
flashbacks.
I'm like, almost, I can't, like, I'm too distracted because I can't see anything.
I wanna ask you some specifics. How did you like, and I know it's your introduction to the concept of it, but did you like how they did the voice? You know, the thing that the Bene Gesserit and Paul use that is, you know, I say Jedi mind trick, but it's where the Jedi mind trick came from, really.
Well, I asked Lucas if that was almost like essentially Jedi mind trick. I was like, is this like when Obi-Wan was like, no, these aren't the droids you're looking for? I literally thought that's what it was going to be. And he explained, no, it's not. It's not something that needs to be, that's used specifically on the weak-minded. It can be used on anyone.
Right.
Regardless of how mentally intelligent and powerful and all that.
And creatures. We saw that, like, the Reverend Mother, they're like, oh, it doesn't understand us. And she's like, get out. It understands me.
I was like, is that a spider? I was like, I don't know.
Honestly, Dune fans, like, people who have read the books, have no idea what the fuck that is. Like, we're all like, I don't know what that is. It's terrifying. Get it out of here. Mm-hmm. I think that I really liked how visually and also actor-wise how the Baron was portrayed. The Baron is and can be an extremely problematic character for a lot of reasons, especially in like the 84 film. I think they rode the line where he is revolting in a sensible, grounded way, whereas he doesn't have to have giant like pustule zits and stuff on his face. He's just huge, ruthless, and daunting.
He's almost he visually speaking, he's almost the physical embodiment of complete gluttony.
Absolutely. And that's always what he's meant to be.
Yeah, and it's not just obviously just like the idea of food where he's just like, because his jowls and everything are big, he's just like a big thing, but the way he moves, where
you talk about the spice too, the way that like how the Harkonnens treated the Fremen and hogged all the spice and all the money they were making, and
exactly. I kept thinking about like the greed, the everything going on, but also visually speaking, again, the scene in particular where we are kind of introduced to his character, where he's like sitting in this vat of what looks like oil. And again, which is an interesting visual, considering what we were talking about, it being so linked to, inspired to World War II, the Middle East, and everything. So just that aesthetic where he is like bathing himself in this black, gross sludge, and it's just like washing over him. And you're not really so much focused on what he's saying, but you're just so focused on how scary he is, how intimidating he is, and how he controls the room with the fear he puts in everyone. And also Dave Bautista, dude, fucking love you, man. And he did really great reacting in this movie, because I don't know if we would have been able to see Skarsgård's character as the Baron as fearful as he was if it wasn't for Dave Bautista coming in and being his bolder, massive, awesome, kick-ass self, and him being like, yes, uncle, okay, yeah, all right, whatever you want.
And I think that's kind of,
you're busy, I'm gonna bolt.
I've heard some people complain about the casting of Dave Bautista, but for me, he is what you need for the Beast Raban, because he is essentially kind of a mindless killer brute that gets placed in charge after, with the absence of the Atreides family. The Baron puts him in charge, and he's kind of set up to fail. Bautista's basically just set up to like be a physical threat, and I think he does that. We see him like decapitating Atreides soldiers. I love all the I love all the war scenes when it's like the Sardaukar, which is the Imperial Army, coming down like on their little like looks like strings almost like marionettes, or the Fremen popping out of the desert.
Oh, that was really cool.
All the action stuff in here really works. But it's not about that. But when we get to the action, I'm like, oh, everything about this is so visually stimulating. Because when it boils down to it, Dune's it's a drama. It is a drama dealing with politics, betrayal, and things like that. Kind of like it is very much Game of Thrones in the sand. Whereas Game of Thrones has action, yes, and we love it for the action, but we're there for the political intrigue and for all the things going on between the families. Yeah. And I'm wondering, I know this is kind of branching out a little bit. I'm hearing mixed reactions to Eternals, and a lot of the pros and cons are kind of sounding similar to Dune with the density of it, the length, and some people saying it's boring, some people saying that they love how much depth there is to it. and I'm really interested to see how I feel about it. I mean, we're almost there, a couple weeks.
Mhm.
I'm hoping that I love it like I love Dune.
Absolutely. I feel very similarly. I thought it was really interesting to see both these massive sci-fi epics. One a little bit safer than the other, obviously, because one is attached to already an incredibly financially and critically successful franchise, and the other one is very much
Two
a
Academy
standalone.
Award winning directors.
Yeah, exactly. Um, but yeah, so and they both have been critiqued for being, like you said, too long, too philosophical, too boring, and
Go watch your
Eternals.
Transformers movies.
But Eternals is meant to be a very deep philosophical film, and what's her name? Is it Chloe Zhao?
Yeah.
Yeah, Chloe Zhao, the director, who um, famously won her Oscar for Best Director for uh, Nomadland, is very similar. It's not so much about the script. It's not so much about what is said. It's more about the reaction. It's more about sitting there and absorbing the feeling and the philosophies of what's going on behind these characters. And in Eternals, what crazy fucking characters.
Well, and you talk about the
They're
characters.
literal gods.
You talk about the characters. I think both these movies have been accused of having like non-relatable characters. And it seems like a weird thing to say because that feels like something you need to have in a story.
Yeah.
But I love the Dune book. However, I never related to Paul at all
Yeah.
or any of the characters, but I was invested in the scope of the story and what was happening. It's just a different form of storytelling. And I think Eternals might be that. They are 7,000 years old. Um, there's not a lot of life experiences that we can be like, oh, hey, they're just like us.
I mean, like at the end of the day, like how much can we really relate with a god?
Right. And
Or
essentially
how much can we really relate with a messiah? Realistic.
that's why Superman's such a hard story to tell. But yeah, no, that it's this like super prophecy chosen one, and I think that by Frank Herbert saying that like, don't worry about relating to him. I'm telling you the story of what happens to this character, and you're just experiencing. No, especially as it goes further on.
Mm-hmm.
But just thinking through scenes of the movie, what's something that really stuck out to you as impressive or immersive? I know the music took you out from time to time through it, but was there a scene that really did it for you?
I know this is supposed to be like a really cool moment, but stop! I can't even.
I will say to help you feel validated a little bit, because we saw it in the theater, there would be like little pauses in like sound, and I'm trying to tell Lauren something because she looks confused about something, and I'll go to whisper, and the music's like boom. I'm like, well, I'll wait. I will wait.
Oh, I think I know AJ like listed costume design, makeup, sound, visual effects, sound design or sound editing. Maybe okay. Score, a best original score is neither here or there because that's completely subjective. But sound design, I will get behind is solid.
Just like I could feel the thopters, the dragonfly things that they were in. Everything was just, especially with the sandworms, all that sound design was incredible.
And to be honest, every single IMAX experience I've ever been in personally it's not great. It's too much. It's overwhelming. I'm like, there's points where I'm like, I don't like that.
See, my ears are like, bring it. Let's go. I want it.
Like, I have very sensitive ears. I can't. I'm just like, that's just too much. I'm like, I don't want it. But again, so some of my favorite aspects of the movie, visually speaking, as well, is that I think it's an extra scene. It's a filler scene, exposition scene. It's the moment where, well, actually two of them now that I think about it, where Leto, he goes up to Jessica and he's like, yo, lady, one, I should have married you because you're fucking hot and gorgeous in your mind. I love you. But
I do have to say, I love that he said that to her in this movie, whereas in the 84 one, he just says it twice in his head and it's a voiceover. I'm like, Why do we care about that?
He was like he couldn't. Yeah, he can't marry her, considering her purpose. But they had this moment where like I never questioned anything. But what is going on? What is all this conversation regarding our son? I am worried about him. He's never had any issues until last week, and he visited your mom.
I love the line that he has where he says, you know, will you protect him? And she says, with my life. He's like, I'm not asking you, I'm asking the Bene Gesserit. And I was like, oof, you got questioned
And
as
then she doesn't answer. She just was like, she just kind of like almost kind of feels like she distracts him, where she's like, give me a hug. I would never.
The scene that really stands out to me, like anything involving the sandworms, because I love like the ripple effect on the sand and the design and everything. But specifically, we've talked about Dr. Leah Kynes, but when she's getting ready, like she's got her hooks out, she's like, I'm going to ride a sandworm to this other keech, and I forgot why she was going, but she gets like shot in the back, and then they come over to her, and she's got the thumper going that attracts the sandworms, and she just starts pounding the ground, and it's like the music going with it, and the sound design is just pounding the ground, and then the worm comes up and just swallows all of it. That worked for me maybe more than anything else in the movie. I thought it was beautiful. I thought that it was symbolic of the spiritual relationship that the Fremen have with the worm. It was the way to go out. In the book, she walks out in the desert and dies.
Yeah, that's definitely a cooler way to die. That's for damn sure. I feel bad watching this movie. I was like, cool, space desert worms, like tremors.
I definitely, before I ever knew anything about Dune, I was like, oh, it's tremors.
But I was like, I remember AJ was in the chat when I brought this up, and I was like, it was almost distracting because I kept thinking, especially there was like part where they focused in on the center, and I was like, oh god, I'm like, this looks like an anus. I can't.
But it's an anus with brine teeth, like a whale.
Yeah, it looks like a hairy anus. Okay, like I couldn't. There's a point. I literally laughed. And
That's
I was
actually
like,
the subtitle of Part 2. Dune Part 2. Hairy Anus is Among Us.
But then I thought, because there's a point where they kind of focused in on the center, and it was like a pulsing sphincter, and I was like,
Fair enough. Fair enough. Just trying to hold it together.
It was like absorbing into it. But anyway, so
Collecting.
But I am really excited to see. I think it was a really great teaser introduction as far as their not only the Arrakis' people, their relationship with the worms, honestly, because I know they're revered as gods, essentially, these all-knowing creatures, but it can be used to their benefit in some ways. Like you mentioned, they can ride them, they can trick them to go such and such direction on occasion, but they're incredibly smart. So I'm really curious to see how that's going to be used in the upcoming films. Are they going to be like actively communicating pollen these worms? I don't know. Are they going to be like?
We saw that shot that Vishni had of the future where him and like the army of Fremen are like fighting that war, and you just see sandworms like all over the place in the background.
Mm-hmm. I was like, I honestly thought that was like more, not so much like due to of a relationship. I thought it was just because they sense the vibrations, the feeling, the feeling of this is where we're gonna eat dinner. Because that's what they go for. They go for repetition, the vibrations, and that's how they were attracted to that big old tractor thingy, that spice thingy truck thing, and that's why they're gonna go towards this battle, which is a whole bunch of steps with a whole bunch of people, and they're like, oh, chicken wings. So that was my mindset, honestly, rather than you guys battle up front, we're gonna hang in the back just in case any of the other soldiers come out here try to trick you or some shit, or because we're gonna gobble them up. So
I wish this was like one of my last thoughts before I kind of start approaching wrapping up here.
Mhm.
Doctor, even though I know that Doctor Yue was going to betray the Atreides family, I wish there was more lead up because I believe in the original. It's a surprise to Duke Leto, but it's not supposed to be sold as a surprise to us because we're supposed to
Mhm.
see like a scene with Yue and the Baron discussing why he's betraying him and like getting some depth on that. And
I
then it's like
love that for you, way. Oh.
we're waiting for the ball to drop, you know? Like you see the conversation, then you're like, okay, when is this going to impact us? And then when like the Duke goes out into the hallway and stuff, and there it is.
Mhm.
I would have approved or liked that instead, I think. But I really do feel when I start critiquing this film, for me, it feels like nitpicks because I walked out of that movie telling Lauren, telling Twitter, I was like, this is my favorite sci-fi movie, like spectacle wise. And I don't expect anybody to agree with that. I know it sounds extremely
Mhm.
dramatic. I love Star Wars. Star Wars is a lot of fun. But as far as like being completely immersed and just like shake it to my core, that's how I felt about Dune. Now
Mhm.
that strangely retroactively could change if part two is disappointing or for some reason we don't get
Yeah.
part two at all. It is going to affect my feeling about this because I do feel like I turned the movie off halfway, and I hate that I'm going to wait like 2 to 3 years to turn it back on. But this potentially, because this will, I will watch it all as one thing, could be my favorite thing to come from science fiction.
Yes, absolutely. Like I mentioned, it's very frustrating for someone that doesn't know the book to be not only for it to be so anticlimactic from our point of view, and where everything is speculation, everything is set up, and the ending doesn't feel like a real ending, and therefore, I do worry honestly that this is going to be if we don't hypothetically, what if we don't get a sequel? In order for this movie to be financially successful, it needs to make 500-600 million dollars.
Right. And a lot of people
And
are putting a positive spin on the fact that it just made 41 million and pushing it over 200 million worldwide. Thing is, it's been out worldwide for weeks. So that's accumulated over
yes,
weeks.
absolutely. And I
I
have a lot of friends that have already seen it and that have seen it internationally multiple times, and I'm so excited for them. Um,
I could go on a
which
rant about HBO Max. I am mad at that whole thing. I
I
think like
will.
I think
I
you could give it 2 weeks. Do like 2 weeks. Let it have its theatrical big money
they
open
weren't
like
it wasn't this movie's a risky as fuck movie. I was actually talking about it with my husband earlier, where and as well as like a bunch of people in the generals chat, AJ was in there, where I was like, if I was a film investor, if I was a studio head and I was like trying to pick and choose projects, and I'm like, well, I know our studio has been really fucking up this year, we really need to pick our next few projects really wisely in order to secure some real good financials for the next few years, right? Okay. I would not invest in this movie. Sci fi epics historically do not do well, especially when they're considered a stand-alone. Now, this is from a very talented director. However, he's not a very bankable director. The cast is a great cast. However, they're not Tom Cruise. They're not Will Smith. They're not huge A-list stars, like quote unquote A-list stars. They're all like awards accoladed actors and everything, but they're not Angelina Jolie. There's no Brad Pitt. But on top of that, again, sci-fi.
if there's not a star in front of your name, it's
Yeah,
rough.
yeah, exactly. Sci-fi films aren't super bankable. You can't talk about the movie Arrival, or you can talk about some movies from the MCU and famous sequels and everything. Thing is, these are from very famous franchises, and one of the great things about Arrival, not only is it a great movie, obviously it's fantastic, but that movie cost like less than $50 million to make.
I was honestly surprised at the
This movie
budget of
cost
this movie. I thought it was going to
almost
be over.
200 without advertising. That's
Right.
fucking insane.
Well,
You're
there's
setting it
so
up.
many Marvel movies that are 200 plus. I was surprised that when I looked it up, this was like 160, 170
Yeah,
because it is one of the most expensive looking movies I've ever seen.
it is. It's worth every I absolutely agree. It's, do you really want to invest financially knowing how risky it is? A standalone movie, which is based off arguably the best selling, or arguably the best sci-fi book of all time.
Well,
My
everyone
husband,
calls it the Lord of the Rings of sci-fi for a reason.
absolutely not only that, I mean, like it's been best selling for over 70 years, since like this early 60s
If
or
you go to
50s.
Barnes and Noble, there's a top to bottom Dune shelf because there's 16 novels in the Dune
It's
series.
crazy. I will never argue against that. Again, the 80s film, sure, I guess, has a cult following, but is dragged and it's not a good movie. But this is not a world that people have been talking about wanting up until because of this. We only got it because of, in theory, because of Denis Villeneuve's passion for the project. And I love that he has the passion for it the way he did, and bringing such a great book adaptation to the film. But if I was investing my own personal money, I'm like, that's too fucking risky. If I don't know if I'm going to get my returns.
And I really do think that because yeah, I'm hearing a lot of people say that they watched it on HBO Max, which is great, but how many new people watched it on HBO Max? Probably not a lot. I don't think people are getting HBO Max for Dune. I think they're like, oh, hey, I already have HBO Max.
Hey,
Great, I can watch Dune. And
yeah.
I think that it was a complete mismeasurement or mistake to do the day and date for a
Mm-hmm.
year out, like right away. I was like, you should have done this month by month. You should have done this movie by movie. It should not have been just a whole listing of films, and because it undercut Suicide Squad. Not that Suicide Squad might not
I
have been like
know.
the biggest movie of all time, but I think it would have done better.
Maybe. Who the fuck knows? It's not a good movie, but
I enjoyed it, but
you
I
can
get that
enjoy
it's
it.
not for everybody.
You know, it's like, no, it's fun to enjoy a movie. I don't want people lying to me about it. I've had people literally tell me it's the greatest superhero film of all time, and I'm like, calm down.
That's
Um,
false.
exactly.
It's
I don't
not
want
even the
people.
greatest DC movie.
You can. I love it when people say, "This is my favorite. This is my favorite use of this character. This is my favorite movie with this director." Don't say this is the best X, Y, and Z movie of all time, because you're setting people up to for failure. You're setting them up to
If I
not like
misspoke
your
earlier, I was
expectations are being
saying
too fucking high.
if I misspoke earlier, I was saying this is like my favorite sci-fi experience. I'm not, and like I said,
Yeah,
I don't expect anyone to agree with
emphasis
me.
on favorite, not
Yeah,
the best, hands down.
right.
Yeah.
Um, we're yeah. I agree. This is kind of a side note. It says I fear for the Matrix Resurrections box office
Yeah.
wise. I think that's fair. I fear for Warner Brothers box office wise, and I hate saying this because this movie got pushed so many times, and I
Mhm.
wanted it selfishly so bad. Probably could have waited still because this movie's going to look good like 5 years from now. And I think amidst the pandemic, when some people are still scared to go to the movies, and you have like the HBO Max thing, uh, this was not the most box office it could make. But I also understand it costs money to keep it on the shelf.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yes, I absolutely agree. It costs money to put a movie on the shelf, and it again, it depends on the movie. It depends on the investment involved. Um, with a movie like this, it's really hard to. They were probably hoping for, uh, like, remember when Tenet came out,
Yeah.
and they're like, "This is the movie that's going to break COVID." People are going to be totally fine going to theaters again. Like, no
I
big
think
deal.
everyone just needs to back up and let Disney save the theaters for a few months, and then they can start coming in because that seems to be like what it takes.
Yeah, it's yeah,
I don't.
it
I
really sucks.
never, in my wildest dreams, think Dune would have been a 200 million opening weekend thing, but I think it could have like flirted with 100. Like I think we could have had 80,
Who
90,
knows?
100 opening weekend. So 40, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is like $5 million more than they were expecting." I was like, "That's not great."
It's still not great financially speaking. again, but I don't think personally. I think you were like it could have flirted with up to 100. I don't think it could have gotten more than 60 max, even without COVID restrictions or anything like that. Personally, because again, like I was saying earlier, a lot of sci-fi films, standalone sci-fi films, that end up becoming successful financially later on, like you mentioned, like Arrival
Well,
or
look at Blade Runner. Speaking of Denis Villeneuve,
which
Blade Runner flopped twice.
which was complete. I love that movie. It's actually, I prefer that movie over this movie. But that's just personal preference.
But it goes to what you're saying about sci-fi
But
films.
that movie, similar budget, like 150, almost 200, not including marketing. And as far as I remember, it didn't crack 250. It was considered a huge flop. And then you want to give a director with even bigger scope, with even a bigger thing. People
Bigger
are kind of
cast.
clamoring for. People are asking questions regarding Blade Runner 2029. As far as I know, I've never heard people. I never heard people talk about. Yeah. Oh my gosh, we should totally have the unfilmable book to be turned into a movie.
It
Like,
worked so well with Wrinkle in Time.
yeah, like they don't do well, and so again, risky in every single way. So it being with that being said, I would be very surprised. I would be eating my words if it ever went up to that high. I don't think it's going to be financially successful. I don't
I
think.
am praying for a break even, but I know that's
Mhm.
hoping for a lot.
I agree. I think it. I do think we're going to get a sequel based off popularity and awards accolades. Absolutely.
The second will be a theatrical exclusive, I'll tell you right now.
Of course, absolutely. But I don't think this is going to be the success. I don't think financially this is going to be a success in spite of how
I think the
much
best
people
it can
want
hope
it to be.
for is the attention from the Academy right now. Because I don't think its success is going to be with box office, but it might do some
Exactly.
awards. It might get some retroactive views. Like all of a sudden,
Mhm.
then HBO is going to blow up because it's already been out of theaters, and then people are going to
Mhm.
watch it. Um, I guess one of my last thoughts is whether you're unsure about it, you're excited for it. Everyone just go see Dune, get more voices out there. I want to hear from more people. I want this thing to do as good as it can because I think there's so much great story and world to explore. And like I said, there's 16 books, 6 by Frank Herbert, and then like 10 by his son Brian. Uh, they could do a lot with this. And then Denny's talking about doing like the Sisterhood of the Bene Gesserit HBO Max show. Like this could be not as successfully big, but like world building, this could be as big as Star Wars. There's so many different avenues you can do with Dune. It is, like people have said, the sci-fi Lord of the Rings. I hope we get more from it. Um,
Um, if we do get more worlds, if we do go into where it is such a heavy world building focused franchise, which I would actually love to see. One of the big problems with that is that there needs to be a certain lightness to the movie. What one of the great things about Star Wars, like I mentioned, because there is tons of world building and
is
everything,
the
but
fun.
there's a lot of fun to it. There's weirdness to the characters and the storylines and everything. There's no sense of likeness in Dune. There's
It,
no like characters that are cracking jokes. Duncan's dead, and there's no character where we're like, yeah, I just want to hang out with that guy and have a beer. Let's just
I'll say
no. Like
Duncan's not going to get any
there's not
funnier.
gonna be like Baby Yoda situation. There's no Grogu. No, like
Oh,
chicken
that
nugget.
desert mouse was pretty cute.
Yeah, there's like I no. The cutest thing you have animal wise was that random little mouse that I think died.
Well, that mouse is again, unfortunately, people like don't know, but like the mouse itself is foreshadowing because that mouse is called by the Fremen Muad'Dib, and that is the name that Paul takes upon himself because he's the little mouse, and they call him Muad'Dib. But again, nobody does that because are not there yet. Anyways, I just want to. We've been running a little over an hour now. Alex, what are some last thoughts? If you were trying to sell or unsell anyone on seeing this movie, what would you tell them? What's the experience?
It's definitely a movie I think you can watch to appreciate and generally enjoy as like as for a cinematic experience. It is don't watch it because you're looking for a good time. That's a very different film experience.
As much as we disagree on some things, I will agree that it's
Yeah,
not
like
a
I'm not
great
gonna
time
I'm
in
not gonna be
here.
hanging out. I'm not gonna be chill. I'm not gonna be like cleaning my house, just chill, relaxing, watching the movie, and I need something in the background. No, nay, nay. If you want an experience where you're like, I've never seen anything like this before. Oh my gosh, what is gonna happen? The drama. Everyone is so dramatic. You watch this. Again, there's nothing, visually speaking, there's nothing like it. And there is a lot to appreciate with that. And so kudos to DV.
Absolutely. And I agree with some of those sentiments. I think this movie is mind-blowing, whether it resonates with you. I know co-host of my Speakeasy show, Sean Wingblade, it didn't really hit him. I walked out of the movie feeling changed. It's something that I wanted to revisit immediately. But again, the first trailer drove me to listen to a 22-hour Audible book. So like I was invested. I'm sure I have some bias there. But
we all have movies like that, though.
Of course.
Everyone does.
I recommend that if you've already seen it or you want to learn more about it, there is, I think it's called like Quinn's Ideas. There's a YouTube channel, and the dude just like his whole channel almost is dedicated just to Dune content. So you can get some great explanations there. Watch the old movie for fun. There's 2 sci-fi series, one of them starring James McAvoy. Absorb some Dune content. Listen to the book. Explore that. But anyways, that's pretty much it for me. Alex, do you want to let the people know where they can find you?
Yeah. Oh, hello. What's up? I'm not going to strip for you, but hey. You can actually find me on Twitter at real_AlexMac. And I am personally trying to complete a movie challenge before the end of the year where I complete 300 first-time watches. So currently wow. I just crossed, I know, first-time watches. It's one thing if you're watching movies, because I've rewatched a ton of movies, but first time watches was a lot harder than I thought. And I just crossed 200, so I don't know how the fuck I'm gonna get to 300. So wish me luck. But yeah, check me out there. I also do stuff with the Collection podcast, the Schmodown After Show. So yeah, check us out there. Much appreciated. And last thing. I co-host a show called Cinema Bias with Drew Grant, aka Video Drew, on her channel, where we dive into our movie biases, for, against, whatever it might be. And right now we're going into the filmography of James Mangold, and we're diving into each and every one of his films. So last week we covered Identity with John Cusack and a whole bunch of people, and I can't remember the next one because I don't know his filmography very well, clearly. I think it's Walk the Line. I think I could be wrong. So wish me luck.
Awesome. Well, luck well wished. You can find me as always on my channel, Flickin' Real. But the times you can find me are I'm gonna bring this up right here. Boom. Or do I have I don't have my other graphic. But we do our Monday morning shows at 11 a.m. Typically that's news and views, where we just break down the last 7 days of movie news. And also Sunday nights at 11 p.m., all of this being Pacific Standard Time. And that's just the Speakeasy, where we talk about whatever we want, whatever we're feeling like, have a bunch of guests on. It's the Kickback, Have a Drink show. Coming up next month. Coffee. What's up? Sometimes coffee. Yeah.
We assume not whiskey or something.
Yeah.
Maybe a little early for a beer.
And next month, towards the end, I'm sure we'll be starting our Hawkeye reviews, because they're going to drop 2 episodes the first day. And yeah, Alex, you are always welcome back, but thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you everyone in the comments, whether it be Jeremy Miller, Pardis, AJ Lancaster, Sean Wingblade. I appreciate all you guys being here. Maddie, of course, Galaxy Geeks. Go check all those folks out. They're all really great people. But anyways, that is it for us. Appreciate you guys, and we'll see you next time. But until then, keep it real. Hey everyone, Jesse here, and don't exit out quite yet. While I have you, I want to take just a quick second to talk with you about something that's very important to me. Right now on the Flickin' Real channel, we're just a couple of guys sitting around and speaking geek, but we think that we can build into something greater. We think that we can build a community. a place for all of us to come together and talk about our thoughts and experiences about various types of fandoms. For this to happen, though, we do need your help, so please do me a huge favor and subscribe to the channel. Along with that, click that little bell icon that notifies you anytime that we upload new content for your viewing pleasure. So again, thank you so much for stopping by and visiting us this week. We hope we'll see you again next week. And just remember, until then, keep it real.